Is maximizing minimizing your happiness? Today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about a form of perfectionism called maximizing and how it quite possibly is impacting your level of happiness. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Wellness Simplified podcast. Simple wellness tips to help you improve your life without turning it upside down. With your host, award-winning fitness instructor, nutrition coach, and wellness expert, Suzi Phoebens.
I'm really excited about today's episode because I think maximizing is something that impacts a lot of our lives, but it's not something that we have been able to perhaps identify as such until maybe now. It's not something that I knew anything about until I took my positive psychology course. And then as soon as they started to describe it, I was like, oh my gosh, like I know this person. So as we go through this, maybe you're going to recognize yourself as a maximizer, or if not, you're going to be able to come up with someone in your head, friend or family member, who's definitely a maximizer. We all have at least one of these people in our lives, if it's not ourselves. And I think women especially are a little bit more likely to fall into this maximizing category, and I'm not sure why. And that's a bit of a generalization, I guess. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I have no statistics to support that. This is just my general feeling from, living in the world for the last almost, 39 years. Not quite, but we're getting there. Anyway, maximizing is a form of perfectionism. And we know about perfectionism in one sense because we think about perfectionism as somebody who has to have everything perfect, as in if they were working on, say, their Christmas tree, because I always have Christmas on the mind. They want to have everything just so. They can't have a light that's out. Everything has to be just in the perfect place. But perfectionism actually goes a little bit deeper than that. And let's first just want to share this quote from Brené Brown, who says, "Perfectionism is not about healthy achievements and growth. Perfectionism is the belief that if we live perfect, look perfect, and act perfect, we can minimize or avoid the pain of blame, judgment, and shame. Perfectionism is, at its core, about trying to earn approval and acceptance." So let's just keep that in mind as we go through this here today. Perfectionism is, at its core, about trying to earn approval and acceptance. So I realize we may have already hit on a sore topic there if you identify as a perfectionist. Maybe you're seeing some of that in yourself already, or maybe you're getting your back up a little bit like, no, I am not looking for approval and acceptance. That's not my quote. That's Brené Brown's. You can take that up with her. But let's talk a little bit more about perfectionism in general. So perfectionists, and this is a quote from Tal Ben-Shahar, and I apologize if I have pronounced that a little bit incorrectly, but he is a teacher and writer that focuses on positive psychology and leadership, and he works at Harvard and created the most popular course in Harvard's history, and that course was all about positive psychology. So he is one of our leaders in the field. So he says that perfectionists are unable to enjoy the present because they are so focused on what is next. The next achievement, the next prize, milestone, etc., which they believe will be the key to making them happy. It is an endless race in an attempt to reach impossible goals, and the enjoyment of success is short-lived. And we can go on a whole other tangent, and maybe we will in another podcast episode, about how the things that we think are going to bring us happiness only bring us a short-term happiness. Like the winning of the lottery only increases our happiness statistically by about 10% for 2 years, and then it goes back to the baseline. So those people who are always saying, oh, once I achieve this, then I will be happy. Once I do this, then I'll be happy. But as soon as they achieve that, they've put their eyes on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And they never find their happiness. And that is an aspect of perfectionism, whether you recognize it as such or not. So that is perfectionism. And then we're going to go into a subset of perfectionism that's called maximizing. And essentially, maximizing means that a person is always looking for opportunities to find more pleasure. So it's the eternal search for happiness that keeps us out of happiness. So the search for happiness that actually keeps us out of happiness. And that's a little bit of a mind bender. I understand that. So I'm going to give you a very real world example. In fact, this is the example that was used to explain in my course about maximizing. And thank you to my trainer, Kelly, who shared the story because this is from her actual real life. I'm going to change some of the things a little bit because I don't remember the exact details, but you'll get the gist. So say you're looking for a new piece of carry-on luggage, okay? So you want a suitcase that you can go and can fit into the overhead compartment. Remember those days when we used to go on airplanes? This was from those days. So you wanted one that could fit in the overhead compartment. You want the ones that have the 4 wheels, that can go in all directions, as opposed to the older style that just has the 2 wheels, so that you can be one of those cool people that just strolls down the airport and just has a hold of their suitcase and it's just zipping along beside them instead of you having to tilt it. Want to have like the handle that comes up out of it so you can stand and walk and take it with you without having to bend over or carry it or anything like that. You want one that has some good pockets. You want an outside pocket or two in case you have things that you want to put in and out of it easily. And you want to have some good sections inside, like the shoe holders, maybe one of those mesh sections. And, basically a standard carry-on suitcase. But you know what? You really have your heart set on a pretty purple one. For whatever reason, that is what you're envisioning. You want a purple one, you want those 4 spinny wheels, the handle that comes out, you want it to fit in the overhead compartment, you want some pockets, all of that. So you go to the store, and the first store you go to, they have a whole lot of carry-on luggage. They have 1 or 2 that meet your criteria. So there's one that's like a patterned purple, and there's one that's a regular purple. And they have the pockets, it has the wheels, it has the handle, it has everything that you wanted. But you're just like, I'm just going to run to the luggage store on the 2nd floor of the mall and see what they have. Because you're already at the mall. You're already there. So you go to the luggage store, and they too have a few that meets all of your requirements. They have 2 different shades of purple, and then they have one that is 2 shades of purple. So, if you're not feeling lavender, if you're not feeling dark purple, you could go with that. So now you have like 5 suitcases to choose from. You have the patterned purple, you have the plain purple that was in the first store, the light purple that was in the second, the dark purple that was in the second, and the two-tone that was in the second. And every single one of them meets the criteria that you laid out before you went shopping. But you think, I bet you Amazon has one. Maybe you even whip out your phone while you're there in the store and start searching through Amazon to compare prices, to see what they have, get out the measuring tape so that you can compare the size of the Amazon one to the ones that are in the stores, and you look everything over, and eventually you go home and you haven't bought a suitcase at all. And whomever knew that you were going shopping, your significant other, mother, child, friend, whomever, says, "Oh, did you find a suitcase when you went shopping?" They'll say, "Yeah, I saw some, but I decided not to get any, and I'm going to check XYZ to see if they have a better one." And then you spend, 3 or 4 hours on the internet going to every website that you can think of that sells luggage to look and see and compare how those ones on the internet compare to the ones that you saw in store. And eventually you either A, don't buy any suitcase at all because you're certain that the perfect carry-on suitcase is out there and you just haven't found it, or you end up buying one because you've run out of time and you're going on a trip tomorrow and you have to go back to the store and you have to just get one. And unfortunately, all those pretty purple ones are now gone, and now you're just kicking yourself because you should have bought one when you had the chance, and now you can't order one because you need to leave tomorrow. And now you're stuck with a boring gray suitcase that meets every other one of your requirements but is not pretty purple, and you spend your whole trip thinking, I should have just bought that purple one. So I've digressed from her original story, but the general idea is still the same, that a maximizer, when shopping, even when they find something that meets their requirements, they aren't happy with it. And they're always sure that that magical single object is out there waiting for them. And so they don't purchase when they find something that meets their criteria because they're still looking for that perfect one. Now, let's make sure to identify the difference between being a maximizer and just looking for something specific, because sometimes you are looking for something specific and you find something that almost meets the criteria and you think, oh, should I just suck it up and buy this one that's almost what I want, or should I hold out? That is different, and I think that it is perfectly fine. And I mean, personally, I think it's better to hold out to find that perfect item if you're looking for something specific. So if we're going to stick with purple, there was a day many years ago, I was in Toronto and I was in the mall and I saw this purple crossbody purse. And it was little and I loved it and I didn't buy it. And then I spent the next 3 or 4 years annoying everybody because I was like, oh, I wish I would have just bought it. I should have just bought it. And then one day I happened upon another one and I didn't even hesitate. I just purchased that purple crossbody leather bag because it met my criteria. It wasn't exactly the same as the one I'd seen before, but it met everything that I wanted. And I'd already, spent 2 or 3 years complaining about the fact that I hadn't bought the first one. And of course, there was lots of purple bags that I saw in between those two, but I was waiting for just that right one. And I think that's fine. That's fine, especially when it's something like that, like a purse that, let's be real, most of us don't really need another purse. And according to the drawer I have full of purses, I definitely don't need more. But that doesn't mean I don't want one. That doesn't mean that I'm not always seeking that perfect one I have in my mind's eye. So that is a different thing. Another example of that was when we were looking to adopt Rose and Clara. Before we knew Rose and Clara were Rose and Clara, we knew that we wanted a pair of kittens. We wanted them to be young. We wanted them to be litter mates. We wanted them to be sisters. We wanted 2 girls. I really wanted to have another gray cat because anyone who's listening who remembers my gray cat, Oli, she was the sweetest cat in the world. She was Russian blue and she was just so lovely. And she was my best friend without a doubt. So when she passed, I really wanted to have another gray kitty, but I didn't want one that looked exactly the same as Oli because that would be a little bit weird. Like I was physically trying to replace the cat. So I wanted a Russian blue cat or a gray cat, but I wanted its markings to be a little bit different than Oli's. And so there was lots of kittens coming and going and just nothing was quite hitting what we were looking for. And then that night that I saw the post with Rose and Clara, who were named, what were they named? Something terrible. Like, oh gosh, I don't remember at all. Anyway, I saw them and I was like, those are the kittens because they were young, they were sisters, they were a bonded pair, so they were already besties. Rose, it was gray. She's clearly Russian blue, but she had different markings than Oli did. And Clara and Rose both have similar markings, even though one's black and white and one's gray and white. So they definitely look like sisters. And it was just everything that we wanted. And we'd been holding out until we found the quote unquote perfect pair. And so that's very different than maximizing, because maximizing would mean that we saw 6 or 7 different pairs that met all of our criteria and we didn't adopt any of them because we were still waiting. Those 2 were the first ones that met all of our criteria. So holding out for something and maximizing are definitely different things. So how do you determine if you just like to hold out for the right object or right thing, or you are a maximizer? Well, it's pretty easy, I think. I am not a maximizer, but I just gave you 2 examples of times when I held out for the quote unquote perfect thing or the perfect pair of cats. But I'm not a maximizer. And I know that I'm not because, for example, when we were going car shopping for my new car a couple of years ago, a lot of people, when they go car shopping, they have a lot of very specific criteria. And that's totally cool. That is totally cool. You're allowed, like I just explained all that, you're allowed to be very specific. But I I had some very basic needs. I was tired of driving a car that was, breaking down constantly, overheating constantly. I didn't have heat. I didn't have air conditioning. I didn't have any of the things. So a brand new car was going to be a pretty big upgrade regardless. So when we were discussing what we were going to do, my husband's car is a Mazda. We bought it new and we really liked that. And so we were going to go and get a second Mazda. And he's like, what criteria do you have? And I said, I want to have 4 doors. I prefer a 4 door over a 2 door. I want to have working air conditioning. I want to have working heat. I would like to have some sort of music system. Like those were my criteria. And I said, and you know what? I would kind of prefer the car not be blue because your Mazda is blue. And I don't want us to look like we had the exact same car. Well, he contacted Mazda and it was the end of the year. They only had one of that car left in the lot of that year, and it was blue. But it was a different color blue. So my car is more of a black blue, whereas my husband's is more of a, I don't know, it's not as dark of a blue. And I decided I really just didn't care. They didn't look the same. It was fine. And some of my friends said, you should get them to call around to some of the other local lots. You can probably get a different color. I was like, you know what? I don't actually really care. It's 4 doors, heat, air conditioning. It only had like 27 kilometers on it, and most of those kilometers we had put on the test drive. And I was just so used to having a car that was falling apart at every moment. I was just thrilled to be getting a new one. The color was different than my husband's car, so it wasn't going to look like we were driving the exact same car, which would have been weird. And so I was happy with that. And that's not to say that if you were in that same situation and you had your heart set on a black car or a red or a white or whatever, that makes you a maximizer. That just means that you're specific as to what you wanted. And I wasn't. I didn't care. I told you what my requirements were. This car met those requirements, so I just went with it and I was happy. So just because somebody is specific doesn't mean that they're a maximizer, but I'm going to give you a few indications as to when you might be a maximizer. You remember you might be a redneck if? Well, you might be a maximizer if you have multiple items hanging in your closet right now that still have the tags on them. You might be a maximizer if you always have returns that you need to make. You might be a maximizer if in 3 or 4 different online stores you have a different variation of the same thing, like that carry-on suitcase, in your cart, but you haven't actually purchased any of them. You might be a maximizer if you're still looking for the perfect fill in the blank, even though you've found multiple that would fit all of your criteria. So either you yourself are starting to identify as a maximizer, or instinctively you're picturing someone else in your life who you think, oh, yeah, I know. I know who that person is. But I think that very first one, if you have multiple items hanging in your closet with the tags on them, that is a really good indication of a maximizer. Like the only time that I end up with clothes in my closet that still have the tags on them are because I've either A, forgotten the tags were on them and haven't taken them off, or because I came home and I shoved it in the closet quickly before I could be questioned as to whether I bought something new. And then I will go back later and take the tags off of it. That doesn't happen often, but it has happened in the past. So that is my indications of times when I would have tags on it. Obviously, if you happen to keep gifts in your closet, you're probably going to leave the tags on those. But I'm not talking about gifts. I'm talking about things that you've purchased for yourself, that you've brought home, that you've hung in your closet, but you won't take the tags off because, you still might want to return it. Why did you buy it? This puzzles me greatly. As someone who is not a maximizer, it puzzles me so much when people say, I have had this for 2 years in my closet and it still has the tags on it. Why? Why? Are you buying it and then leaving the tags on it so if you decide to return it, you can, but then the return period expires, so you leave the tags on it so if you want to resell it, you'll get a higher amount off of it? Why are you already planning to resell it or return it if you purchased it because you liked it or you wanted it? Why would you do that if you weren't a maximizer? And that's an honest to God question. Why would you do that? If you do that, why do you do that? If it's not because you're planning to find something better. And, the same thing is still true if you buy something that's a smaller size than what you currently wear as quote unquote inspirational clothing. That's still a form of maximizing because you still think that you could be better. And if you can't make yourself fit into that piece of clothing, you're planning to return it. Why would you do that to yourself unless it's a specific goal piece that you're going to hang on the wall? But if it's a real goal piece, you're going to cut those tags off because you're going to make sure that you're going to do it. If you leave the tags on it, it's giving you an out. It's always giving you an out because maybe you don't think that you're going to be able to do it. Because remember, perfectionism is at its core about trying to earn approval and acceptance. So, okay, maybe you've discovered that you're a maximizer. All is not lost. It's not a problem unless you let it be a problem. And you can definitely overcome this. It's not something that you can do overnight, and it's going to take a little bit of work, but isn't your happiness worth it? Just think about all the hours you have spent, wasted, on trying to find the perfect fill in the blank item when you already found 5 or 6 that would suit your needs, and you could have just bought one and moved on with your life. Because that's what people who are not maximizers, and they're called satisficers or some, I don't know, it's a very weird tense of people who are satisfied with things. It's a very weird tense. So I'm not going to say it again because I don't think I'm saying it properly either. I can read it in my head. It's one of those words you can read in your head, but when you try to say it out loud, it just comes out all weird. But those people, when looking for something, they'll go into the store, and if they find one that meets their requirements, they will buy it and they will move on with their life. But a maximizer will find one and think, nope, could still do better, and goes to the next store, could still do better, and you go to 5, 6, 7, 8 stores, then you resort to online, and then eventually you probably find yourself back in one of those other stores. And same with the suitcase, hopefully the one that you saw that was probably okay is still there, but then if it's not, you're going to have to keep going and reevaluating. And how much time and effort are you sucking out of your life by trying to do that? How much time? I think about my phone case. I got it for free when I upgraded my phone. They happened to have this old, it wasn't old, it had never been used. It was a display OtterBox. And when they had to change out the displays, the head office tells them just to throw out all the phone cases, but they don't because they're still good phone cases. And I knew the person that I was getting my phone upgraded from is a friend, and she's like, we've got this case if you want it. And I was like, hell yeah, I want it. It's a free OtterBox. I'm just going to buy an OtterBox anyway. I want that case. I don't care what color it is. It's not like it was camo or something. I probably wouldn't have wanted it if it was camo. I do have some requirements, but this was a plain, like, maroon phone case. It was lovely. It's still on my phone. It's been there for, oh gosh, a year, 2? I don't know when I got my new phone. 2020, the timeline is really messed up in my head, but I think it was a year ago. Anyway, I was very happy with that case. I still am. I'm very thankful that I was able to get that because an OtterBox is a great case, and that's what I usually buy, and that would have been an additional expense. But because I was not a maximizer and I didn't have a certain set of criteria outside of the fact that I wanted a hard case that could withstand me dropping my phone regularly, I didn't really care what color it was. Usually I buy my phone case based on whatever colors are the cheapest on Amazon. So it's not important to me. And it's just my personal preference is I put my requirements on sturdiness and protecting my phone. Somebody else may put their requirements on the color of the case. And that is totally fine as long as you know what your requirements are. And then when you find one that meets all of your requirements, you get it instead of seeking out the quote unquote perfect version that may or may not exist. Then it's fine. And you might be thinking, if you identify as a maximizer, like, aside from wasting my own time, like, what does it matter? If I want to go to the ends of the earth to find the right coil notebook, then just let me. Well, I mean, it's fine. It's totally fine if that's the way you want to live your life. But those who live life as maximizers are generally less optimistic about the future, they're generally less satisfied with their lives in general, and they display lower levels of happiness and self-esteem. They also tend to have higher levels of depression, perfectionism in general, and regret. Remember that suitcase? That suitcase that they eventually went back to get and then it was gone and then they regretted it? That was a fictional story from a real life experience that somebody else had. But regret is a real part of that because maximizers focus on squeezing the maximum possible benefit out of every single choice and opportunity. Whereas the satisficers, see, I've said it again, but I think I did say it right, feel content with their choices as long as they pass a basic threshold of acceptability. And you get to establish that basic threshold. It's you that gets to do it. You don't have to settle for something that you don't like, but you choose that threshold of acceptability and then you buy or go with the item that meets it. So let's bring it right back to the title of this podcast episode is maximizing, minimizing your happiness. And since we want to bring this all back to happiness, when we choose something based on preset criteria and move on, we're going to satisfy ourselves. To increase our level of happiness, we want to work towards making those types of decisions by identifying what we really want and the criteria that needs to be met. Then, if we limit our choices or choose the first option that meets our criteria and focus on the positive aspects of the choice or accomplishment, we can move on without doubting ourselves or our choices. So we're going to break that down a little bit more in step-by-step form here in a moment. But I want to say this, that it is important that we stick with our choices and embrace them because our brain naturally justifies the choices we make and creates positive sentiment about the choices, but only when it perceives that the choice is permanent and cannot be reversed. So that's going to be a big part of overcoming maximizing. Active acceptance of things the way they are without the desire to improve them supports the practice of savoring, which we discussed in another episode, and relishing what it already is. And really, who doesn't want to be happier? Does anybody want to be less happy? I don't think so. I hope not, anyway. So we need to figure out how to to get over being a maximizer. And maybe if you are identifying as a maximizer, you can always say, "Yes, Suzi, this drives me insane about myself. Like I actually drive myself crazy doing this. I cannot seem to stop." Well, you can overcome it, but it is going to take some work. And in that quote that I just read about how our brain creates positive sentiment about the choices we make, but only when they perceive that the choice is permanent and cannot be reversed, that's going to be a big part of overcoming this. And you may want to start with some smaller price tag items because this is probably going to give you the heebie-jeebies a little bit, okay? So remember, we have to learn to embrace the uncomfortable. It's out of our comfort zone that we grow. And if we're going to overcome being a maximizer, you're going to have to get a little bit uncomfortable. So the next time you're going shopping for something, maybe you're looking for winter boots or a winter coat or, I don't know, a new crock pot, whatever it is, before you go shopping, list out all of your criteria. Every single thing that you need. If you need the crock pot to fit in a certain shelf, you're going to know what the maximum height the crock pot can be is. If you know that you want to be able to cook a 5-pound roast in the crock pot, you're going to have to make sure that it's a certain size. If you're looking at winter boots, do you want them to be ones that you can slip on? Do they need a tie on? Do they need to be completely waterproof? Do they just need to be water repellent? Like, write out all of your criteria. If you have choice or your color preferences, the whole shebang, your price range, all of it. Write it all out. And then when you go shopping, when you find that object, when you find one that meets all of your criteria, you're gonna buy it. You're not gonna go to 4 more stores. You're just going to buy it. If it's within your price range, it meets all of the things you have listed, you buy it. You're gonna come home, and if it's a piece of clothing, you're going to cut the tags off of it. Yes, you're going to cut the tags off of it. You're going to throw the tags away because you've already determined it meets all of your criteria. If it's your crock pot, you're going to take it out of the box immediately. You're going to wash it. Maybe you're going to cook in it that night. I'm not sure. But you're going to take it out of the box. For that one, you may want to keep the receipt because if something goes wrong with it, you do want to be able to, exchange it. But you're not keeping it for returning it unless there's something wrong with it. You're only keeping that receipt in case there's something wrong. You're going to take it home. You're going to cut the tags off of it. If it's something that you can put your name in, you're going to write your name in it. Like a winter coat, you can write your name on the tag. That suitcase example earlier, any of those things, you're going to write your name or put one of those fabric stickers with your name, something, because now it's yours. You have labeled it. They are not going to take that back at the store because it is yours. Then you're going to take this lovely item that is no longer in its original packaging or has no tags. You have made it your own, and you're going to put it away for a couple of days. You're going to put it in the spare room. You're going to put it in the cupboard. You're going to put it wherever. And in a couple of days' time, you're going to go back and you're going to go look at that item. And you know what? You're going to be happy about it because you've given yourself the time. You've given your brain the chance to realize this is permanent. It can't be reversed. This is mine now. And you're going to be like, look at this. I love my new winter coat. I love it. It's just everything that I wanted. It's everything that I wanted. And you didn't spend all of that time trying to find something better. And let's bring another aspect of this in here. You know how they say that the only things worth spending our money on are things that are experiences that we can collect or things that save us time. And you know what just saved yourself a whole lot of time? Being happy with the first item that met all of your requirements and not trying to always find something a little bit better. Because you know what? If some magical time down the road you do stumble upon something that is actually better and you're like, oh my gosh, I need that, you could buy that and you could sell the other one. But in the meantime, you're not wasting all of your brain power and your energy and your happiness on striving to find something that's better than what you could already have. Who doesn't want to be happier? Who doesn't want to be happier? It's not easy to get over perfectionism, but with those few steps that I just laid out, you can really make a good start. Make a concrete list of all the things that you need in the item you're shopping for and all of your criteria, including price range, before you go shopping. When you find one that meets all those criteria, you purchase it. You bring it home, take the tags off, rip the tags out, rip the box up, whatever. Put your name on it or do whatever you can do. If it's a crock pot, you could still write your name on the bottom with a Sharpie. Then put it away for a couple days. Let your brain process the fact that this is permanent and it's yours. And then take it out. And then you'll be able to savor your purchase and be happy with it. Stop wasting all of your time looking for something better when you've already found something that met everything that you wanted to begin with. And let's just finish this off by talking about savoring for a second, because savoring the good helps the good grow, but savoring the bad, as many of us are in the habit of doing by focusing on what is wrong, helps the bad grow as well. And that is yet another quote from Sahar, and that is from 2011. You may not think of maximizing as focusing on the bad, but if you are always trying to find something better than what you have access to right now, even though what you have is perfectly acceptable and meets all of your actual criteria, but you think, oh, there's got to be something out there that's even better. There's got to be something that's even better. You're still focusing on what's lacking in your own life, so you can't focus on the good. Whereas if you think, well, you know what, there probably is something out there that's better than what I have right here, but this has everything that I need, and I'm quite happy with it. It allows you to have more room in your life, more room mentally to be happy. And that is truly what I want for you is for you to have a happier life. And that is why this is the beginning of a little mini series on increasing your happiness. Because you may not know this, but 40% of your happiness comes from the things that you do, your daily activities, your daily practices. 40%, like that is pretty darn significant. So much less of it has to do with our life circumstance versus what we do in our daily lives. So we're going to really focus on how we can make our lives happier without changing our current circumstances, because sadly it looks like this pandemic is nowhere near over. So we need to find our own happiness, and that is what we're going to focus on doing. So we can go into 2021 being like, yeah, the world may still be on fire, but I'm figuring out how to be happy in the circumstances. So that's what we're going to be doing. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know this one is a little bit long, but I'm maximizing the podcast on maximizing. How do you like that? I would love to hear what you think about this episode. Do you identify as a maximizer? Maybe you're a recovering maximizer. Maybe you're married to a maximizer. I'm certain that everybody knows a maximizer. How many times can I say maximizer? Anyway, let me know. Send me an email. Tag me on Instagram at Suzi Confesses. Send me a message on Facebook, facebook.com/confessionsofafitnessinstructor. Tag me on Twitter at Suzi Confesses. I would love to hear from you and what you thought of this episode. I will see you next week when we continue our quest to be happier. See you next time.